It was my birthday, my 51st to be exact, and just like every year before it, my daughter Caitlin didn't call. I tell you, there's something about that day. It's a reminder, a constant slap in the face that I can't shake off, no matter how hard I try. You'd think it would be easier to let go of the past after all these years, but it's not. The hole in my chest feels as fresh now as it did the day she first turned her back on me. I still remember the exact moment it happened. How could I forget? It was a Thursday, 2 days after my birthday, and she'd left me with the kind of silence that cuts deeper than any words could. The years of self-sacrifice, of bending over backward to make sure Caitlin had everything, to make sure she never went without, meant nothing to her. She was the light of my life. I'd worked hard to give her the world. I remember when she was young, looking up at me with those big blue eyes, trusting me to always make things better. But she outgrew me, outgrew my love, outgrew the man who spent his days and nights trying to make sure she never felt a moment of hardship. And on that particular Thursday, she reminded me just how little I meant to her now. It wasn't just the birthday, though. No, it was the phone call. I had been in the kitchen, scrubbing the dishes from dinner when my phone buzzed on the countertop. Caitlin's name lit up the screen, and for a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, she was calling to check in, to say she remembered, to tell me she loved me. "Hey, Dad." Her voice was tight, distant, like she was forcing herself to speak. I'd gotten used to that tone over the last few years, but it still stung. "Caitlin, hi," I said, my hands paused on the sponge. "How are you, sweetheart?" "I'm good, just calling to make sure you're eating okay." That was the usual script these days, her checking in on me, but always with an underlying sense of guilt. And I let it go. It had been too long since I'd heard from her without it. "I'm fine, Kate. Just got back from the doctor today. Everything's good." There was a brief silence. Then, just when I thought she might ask how I was really doing, something different slipped out, something I wasn't prepared for. "You know, Dad, I've been thinking," she continued, voice low and a little too calm. "I think it might be time for you to go to a nursing home. I know you don't want to hear this, but it's just too much for us to handle anymore." I froze. The sponge slipped from my hands, falling into the sink with a soft splash. A dull ache spread through my chest as the words sank in. A nursing home. It wasn't even the idea that hurt, it was the way she said it, so casually, like she was talking about taking out the trash, as if I was just another inconvenience to be disposed of, another burden she was tired of carrying. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know what to say. "I mean, you're not getting any younger, Dad," she added, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed. "And Jeremy and I are working and we're stretched thin. The house, the bills, it's just a lot." I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, like it was being squeezed. I could hear Jeremy's voice faintly in the background, too. Their plans, their perfect little life they had planned without me. I was becoming irrelevant and I could feel it. I thought I'd gotten over the years of hard work, over the sacrifices I'd made for Caitlin, for my family. I thought the love we shared was enough. But this was something else. She was already moving on. She had her life with Jeremy, and I was just in the way now. I couldn't do anything right anymore. "I'll call you later, Dad," Caitlin said. "But I think we really need to think about a plan for you. I know it's hard, but it's just what's best." Then she hung up just like that. No goodbye, no I love you. I stood there, the phone still in my hand, staring at the empty kitchen. My world had just been turned upside down, but I didn't even have the strength to yell. I didn't have the strength to feel anything. Just numbness. It wasn't the first time I'd felt like this, though. Not by a long shot, but something about the way Caitlin said it. The cold, clinical tone she used, like she was scheduling an appointment with a doctor instead of talking to her father. It felt like a punch to the gut, and it broke something inside of me. I spent the rest of the evening in a daze, sitting in front of the TV without really watching it. I tried calling her back, but I let it ring out. No point. She had already made her decision. I wasn't part of her life anymore. The next few days passed in a blur. Caitlin didn't call again. I didn't hear from her. And in that silence, a decision began to form inside of me, a decision that would change everything. You see, you can only be humiliated so many times before you decide enough is enough. If you want to know how it all unfolded after that, you might want to stick around for the rest of the story. You won't believe how it all ended. I spent the next few days pretending everything was fine. It's what I always did, you know. Put on the mask, tell everyone I'm okay when deep down I was crumbling. That's what you do when you're a father, right? You keep it together no matter how much it hurts, because that's what's expected. But this time it was different. Caitlin's words were echoing in my head constantly. "It's just too much for us to handle anymore," she had said, like I was an old piece of furniture they'd grown tired of. And the worst part, I didn't know if I was more angry or heartbroken. Maybe it was both, but I couldn't figure out which one hurt more. But I couldn't just sit there and let this happen. Not without a plan, not without something to show for all these years of sacrifice. It was one thing to be ignored, but to be discarded like I didn't matter. That wasn't going to happen. Not to me. Not without a reckoning. I'm not the kind of guy who would have just snapped and done something rash. No, I've always been a thinker. I've always been the guy who takes his time to figure things out. And when it comes to something like this, something as personal as family, well, I wasn't about to make a move without thinking it through. I'd spent too many years working my ass off for my family, trying to give them a life they could be proud of, only to be tossed aside when I wasn't needed anymore. No. That wasn't how it was going to end. So I took a walk. Just a simple walk around the block, but it was all I could do to clear my head. As I walked down the street, I could hear the sounds of families having barbecues, kids playing in their front yards, the simple joys of people living their lives. It was something I hadn't experienced in years. My own house felt like a tomb now, a place where I was the only resident, and the truth of it stung. But those other families, those people outside living their lives, they were what I wanted. What I'd always dreamed of. I wanted a life where I mattered. But in the world I had been living in, I didn't. Not anymore. As I walked past the houses, I started to think about my own home, the one Caitlin had taken for granted. The house I had worked so hard to build. The memories of Ellen flooded back. It had been our dream. It had been ours together. I had laid the foundation with my own 2 hands, brick by brick, and when we had our daughter, it was in that house that we built our family. And then it was in that house that Ellen had passed away, leaving me to raise Caitlin alone. I had given everything to that house, to Caitlin, to them. And look where I was now. The further I walked, the clearer my thoughts became. I could feel the anger simmering under the surface. It was a quiet anger, the kind that builds over years, but it was real. I had been wronged, and I wasn't going to let it slide. Caitlin and Jeremy, they thought they had it all figured out. They thought they could manipulate me, squeeze me dry, and toss me aside like I was nothing. I wasn't nothing. I stopped at the corner and leaned against a street lamp, thinking about my options. The house was mine, completely, utterly mine. But Caitlin and Jeremy didn't see it that way. They saw it as a cash cow, something they could sell and use for their own gain. They didn't realize that I was still here, that I still had control over everything. The plan started to form then, slowly but surely. I wasn't going to let them take the house. I wasn't going to let them sell it and live their perfect little life in Boulder. I'd been the one who had worked for it all, and I wasn't about to let them destroy it. But I wasn't going to do anything out of rage. No, I'd play the long game. I'd show them exactly what happens when you take everything for granted. I walked back home, my mind made up. When I stepped into the living room, I looked around at the house that had been my life for so long. Every corner held a memory. Every room had a story. But none of it was really mine anymore, was it? Not with Caitlin and Jeremy treating me like I didn't matter. I went to the desk where I kept all my important papers. I hadn't touched them in months, but I knew exactly where they were. I pulled out the deed to the house, the paperwork that proved it all. It was signed, sealed, and legally mine. I was the owner. But that didn't matter to Caitlin and Jeremy. They thought they could just waltz in and take it when they were ready. I needed to be smart. This wasn't just about the house. It was about showing them who was really in control. You might be wondering what my next move was. You might be curious if I really followed through on my plan. Well, let me tell you, things were about to get very interesting. But if you want to know how I pulled it all off, maybe you should stick around and see what happens next. The best part is coming. The days stretched on after that walk, but they felt different now. I had made up my mind. The house, my life, my dignity, it was all going to change, and it would happen on my terms. But as much as I was ready to act, I had to keep my moves quiet. Caitlin and Jeremy still thought they were in control, still thought I was just some old man they could boss around. But they had no idea what I was capable of when pushed too far. The first step was simple. I had to start planning. Not just the big moves, but the small ones. I knew Caitlin would call again like she always did, just a casual check-in, nothing too deep. So I waited. Every night I would sit in my living room, the same worn recliner where Ellen and I used to watch TV together, and I would wait for that call. And when it came, I knew exactly how to play my hand. It was Thursday evening when she finally rang. The phone buzzed, lighting up with Caitlin's name. I hesitated for a moment before I answered. I could hear her voice, still that same forced warmth, like she was trying too hard to sound like everything was fine. "Hey, Dad, just wanted to check in. How's everything going?" I took a deep breath, leaning back in the chair, trying to mask the anger that was still bubbling beneath the surface. "I'm doing all right, sweetheart. Been keeping busy." There was a pause on the other end. "Good, good. You know, I've been thinking about what we talked about last time." "Yeah," I said, my voice calm, but I could feel the tension in my chest tightening. I had to stay in control of the conversation. "Yeah," she continued, her voice suddenly softer. "I really think it's time, Dad. We need to figure out the next steps. I know it's hard, but I'm just trying to help you, you know. Maybe we can get you a place in a good facility, somewhere close to us. Jeremy and I can help make all the arrangements. You won't have to worry about anything." That familiar tone of help was like a slap to my face. The way she said it, like she was the savior, the one who was gracious enough to take care of her old father. But in reality, she didn't care. She cared about the house, about the money, about how they could profit off of me, and that was what hurt the most. I couldn't let her see how much it affected me, so I kept my voice steady. "I've been thinking about that too, Caitlin, but I'm not sure a nursing home is what I need. I'm still fine here in my own home." There was a small, awkward silence on the other end, as if she was considering what to say next. "I understand, Dad, but the truth is we can't keep living like this. You're alone and it's not safe anymore. I don't want to say it, but it's the reality. Things are going to have to change." "I get it," I said, pretending to accept what she was saying, pretending to understand. But inside, I was boiling. I wasn't the problem. They were. They had already made up their minds that I wasn't good enough to be part of their lives anymore. They were making plans for me as if I wasn't even there, as if I didn't matter. I could tell she was trying to push me, trying to make me feel guilty for wanting to stay in my own house, for wanting to hold on to the one thing I had left that was mine. "We just want what's best for you, Dad," she said again, her voice sweet but with that underlying edge of manipulation. "We'll make sure you're well taken care of. I promise." I clenched my jaw, but I kept my voice level. "I'll think about it, Caitlin, but right now I just need some time. I'm not ready for anything to change." I heard her sigh on the other end, but she didn't press me further. "All right, I'll let you think about it. Just don't wait too long, okay? I'm worried about you." "Thanks, sweetheart," I replied, though I knew that wasn't what she was really worried about. She was worried about getting her hands on the house. The call ended soon after that. I sat in the silence that followed, feeling the weight of everything that had been left unsaid between us. I knew I couldn't let this go on any longer. If I was going to get back control of my life, I had to act now. But there was more to it than just the house. There was something else they had overlooked, something they didn't know about me. See, when I had taken out that mortgage years ago, I had done it with more than just Caitlin and Jeremy's future in mind. I had protected myself. I'd put certain things in place, safety nets, you could call them, things I knew they would never think to look for. The next day, I took a trip to the bank. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't even tell Caitlin. I didn't need to, because the bank had something important I needed to see, something I knew would give me the leverage I needed to finally take control of this situation. If you think that's where it ends, you're wrong. The game was only beginning, and Caitlin and Jeremy were about to learn the hard way that they couldn't just take everything from me. But if you're curious about what happened next, you'll need to stick around. Because when the truth comes out, it's going to shake everything they thought they knew about me. And trust me, you won't see it coming. The drive to the bank was long, but it gave me time to think. As I cruised through the quiet streets, the weight of the situation settled heavier on my chest. I knew what was at stake now. Not just my house, but my dignity, my pride, and everything I had worked for. Caitlin and Jeremy, they had taken so much, but they had underestimated me. I wasn't some fool who'd been living under their thumb all these years. I had built this life from the ground up, brick by brick, and it wasn't going to end with me being quietly shoved aside like some relic. When I arrived at the bank, I walked in with purpose. It wasn't the same feeling of dread I had every time I went there in the past. It was something else. This time, I was in control. I approached the counter and asked for a private meeting with my account manager, Marissa. She was the one who had helped me set up the mortgage in the first place, and I trusted her. She was always professional, never prying, always keeping things discreet. After a short wait, Marissa called me into her office. Her smile was warm, but I could see the slight crease in her brow when she saw the seriousness in my face. "Good to see you, Dennis. What can I do for you today?" "Hi, Marissa," I said, settling into the chair opposite her desk. "I need to look at some of my old paperwork, specifically my mortgage documents. I need to know everything I have in place, all the clauses, all the fine print." She raised an eyebrow. "I can certainly pull up your records for you. Is everything all right?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I just nodded, tapping my fingers on the desk as I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. Marissa didn't press me, but I could tell she was curious. I wasn't here for some routine inquiry. I needed something, and I wasn't going to leave without it. She clicked away on her computer for a few moments, pulling up the necessary files. "Here we go. You've been with us for quite a while, Dennis. Everything seems to be in order. You've got a pretty solid mortgage plan in place here." I nodded. "Yeah, I know it's solid, but I need to know everything that's been added over the years, any additional clauses, any contingencies, anything that might affect the house, especially if I were to sell it." She frowned. "Well, the mortgage itself is straightforward, but let me look into the additional documents tied to it. There are a couple of addendums we've processed for you over time. Give me a second." As she scanned through the documents, I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet hum of the office wash over me. I'd come to this place so many times before, but this felt different. Today, I wasn't just another customer. Today, I was making moves that Caitlin and Jeremy would never see coming. The truth was, I had a plan, a well-thought-out plan that would take them by surprise. They had no idea what I was about to do. Marissa looked up after a moment, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Okay, Dennis, I've found something interesting." She turned her screen toward me. "It looks like you've got an insurance policy attached to the mortgage. It was set up a while ago, but it's not something we typically bring up unless it's necessary." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of insurance?" "Life insurance," she said, pausing to make sure I was following. "It's a policy that would pay off your mortgage in full if something were to happen to you. You've got a substantial amount in coverage. It's a standard part of your mortgage agreement, but it's more common with people who have dependents or are planning for something long-term." I felt a chill run down my spine as the pieces started to fall into place. The house, the money. Caitlin and Jeremy had assumed they would inherit everything once I was gone. They thought they had it all figured out, but they hadn't counted on this. "How much is the coverage?" I asked, my voice steady but my heart racing. Marissa checked the policy again. "It's just under $500,000. The full mortgage would be covered plus a little extra. You've got a good deal here, Dennis." I leaned forward in my chair, my mind racing. $500,000. That was enough to make everything disappear, to ensure Caitlin and Jeremy got nothing. Not a dime. The insurance would pay off the house, but more importantly, it would make the entire property unattainable for them. I didn't have to sell the house. I didn't have to give them a penny. And Caitlin and Jeremy, who had been planning their next move, would be left empty-handed. It was brilliant, really. They thought they could manipulate me, use me up, and discard me when they were done. But I wasn't the fool they thought I was. I gave Marissa a smile that probably looked more genuine than it should have. "Thanks, Marissa. You've been a big help. Can you send me all the documents on that policy? I'll need to make sure everything's up to date." "Of course," she replied, clearly unaware of the full scope of my intentions. She began printing the necessary papers, and I sat back in my chair, letting the plan settle in my mind. As I left the bank, the adrenaline was starting to subside, but my heart was still pounding with anticipation. I had what I needed now. The house was still mine, but not only that, it was untouchable. Caitlin and Jeremy could try to sell it, but they wouldn't get a penny out of it. They wouldn't even know what hit them. I walked back to my truck, the weight of the decision I had just made settling on me. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about justice. It was about showing them that I wasn't some weak old man they could push around. It was about making sure they paid for the way they had treated me, the way they had used me, and the way they had tried to steal from me without a second thought. The next few days felt like a strange kind of calm. I was waiting for the moment when Caitlin and Jeremy would make their next move. I knew they would. They were too greedy, too entitled to sit back and accept defeat. But when they did, they would find out the truth, and the truth would hit them harder than they could ever imagine. But if you think that was the end of the story, think again. You haven't seen what I'm capable of. Not yet. The game was just getting started. The days dragged on. The waiting was the hardest part. I could feel the tension building in the pit of my stomach as the quiet of my house settled in like an uncomfortable guest. Caitlin and Jeremy still hadn't called, still hadn't pushed the issue, and I couldn't tell if they were biding their time or if they had genuinely believed I would go along with their plan. The silence felt heavy, oppressive, like a storm just on the horizon, waiting for the right moment to strike. I couldn't afford to be complacent. I had taken the first step, but there was still so much to be done. I kept myself busy around the house, working on small repairs that I had been putting off for years. The kitchen faucet had been leaking for months, and the cracked windows in the living room had been a reminder of how little I had been able to do for myself while I was busy providing for others. Now, I had time to take control of my life again, time to finish what I started. It was late one afternoon when Caitlin finally called again. The phone buzzed in my pocket as I was tightening a loose screw on a shelf in the hallway. I looked at the caller ID, Caitlin's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring twice before I answered, giving the impression that I was busy, just as she had done to me so many times in the past. "Dad," her voice was warmer this time, but there was still that underlying tone of guilt in it. "I know things have been tense. I'm sorry for how everything has been going. It's just been a lot. Jeremy and I have been talking, and we really think it's time to sit down and figure out what's best for you." I let her talk. I had learned over the years that sometimes it was better to let people say what they needed to say. I didn't interrupt, even as my anger simmered underneath. "We were thinking about what you said last time about not being ready for a nursing home," she continued, the words carefully chosen. Maybe we don't need to rush into anything. Maybe we could just get someone to come by more often, check in on you. You don't have to be alone. I could hear the faintest hint of manipulation in her words, but I didn't let it show. I knew exactly what she was trying to do. She was softening me up, getting me to feel like I was part of the decision. But the truth was, she and Jeremy had already made up their minds. They were just waiting for me to fall in line. I appreciate that, Caitlin, I said, keeping my voice steady. But I'm doing fine. I've got everything under control here. There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost feel her frustration. I know, Dad, I know, but you can't do everything on your own anymore. You don't have to handle everything by yourself. We just want to make sure you're okay. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, but it didn't reach me. It felt empty, hollow, like a rehearsed line. I wasn't some child who needed constant monitoring. I had spent years taking care of her, of making sure she never went without, and now I was the one being treated like I was incapable. I understand you're trying to help, Caitlin, I said, finally breaking the silence. But I'm not ready to make any decisions yet. I'll let you know when I'm ready. There was a noticeable shift in her tone. The warmth was replaced with something colder, more impatient. All right, Dad, just don't wait too long. We're only trying to look out for you. And with that, she ended the call, leaving me alone with my thoughts again. But this time, something had changed. I was no longer playing the role of the doting father, the one who just went along with whatever Caitlin and Jeremy wanted. I had seen their true colors. I had realized that they didn't care about me. They cared about what I could give them. And now, I was going to make sure they never got another thing from me. The next few days felt like a slow build-up, each one inching me closer to the final act. I knew what I had to do. It was time to take action. I spent the morning gathering everything I had on the insurance policy, the papers Marissa had given me, the contract details, and the terms that outlined what would happen if something were to happen to me. I reviewed everything carefully, making sure I knew exactly what I was dealing with. I then called the lawyer's office. Todd Fisher, the attorney I had spoken with about the sale of the house, was the person I needed to talk to now. He was experienced, professional, and he'd handled matters like this before. I needed him to help me make sure that Caitlin and Jeremy would be locked out, that they couldn't touch a single penny of the property without my approval. Mr. Hayes, Todd answered on the first ring, his voice calm and collected. How can I help you today? I need to make sure that my estate is in order, I said, not wasting time. I want to set everything up so that Caitlin and Jeremy can't make any moves without my permission. I need to secure the house, and I want to make sure they don't have access to anything without me having a say. I understand, he replied. I've been anticipating a call like this from you. Let's get the details sorted out. I'll start drafting the necessary documents, and we'll make sure everything is legally binding. I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of finality. This was it. I was securing my future, my property, and my dignity. Caitlin and Jeremy were going to have to learn that their actions had consequences. But even as I set my plan into motion, I knew the storm was coming. They would fight back. They would try to take control. And when they did, they'd find out exactly what I was capable of. But that wasn't going to be the end of it. Oh no, this was just the beginning. If you think that's where the story ends, you're wrong. The real drama is about to unfold, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. It's going to get a whole lot messier before it's all over. Stay tuned. The next few days felt like a tense waiting game. I had made my move, set everything in motion, but Caitlin and Jeremy were still acting like they had all the time in the world. The calls had stopped, and they didn't push me on the issue of the house or my living situation anymore. That should have been a sign that they were either too busy with their own lives to care, or they were planning something bigger, something more subtle to get what they wanted. Either way, I wasn't going to make it easy for them. I spent my days getting everything in place. I talked to Todd Fisher and went over the necessary documents for the estate plan, making sure that everything was legally locked down. I couldn't afford to make a mistake now, not when I was so close to finally taking control of everything they thought they had taken from me. The insurance policy was already in place, and I had made sure the house was protected. But there was one final piece. I needed to make everything bulletproof. I had to make sure Caitlin couldn't make any sudden moves. She thought I was too old to be a threat. She thought I was too out of touch with the world around me to notice what she and Jeremy were planning. But what they didn't understand was that I had been watching them for years. I knew how they worked. I knew their game. And now it was time to play mine. A week later, as I was going over the final details of the estate plan with Todd, I received an unexpected call. It was from the real estate agent I had spoken to months earlier about the house. I had nearly forgotten about him, but I guess he had been keeping tabs on the property. "Mr. Hayes," the agent said when I picked up, "I've been reviewing the market conditions in your area and I wanted to reach out to you. I understand you may be considering selling the property. There's been a lot of interest in homes like yours lately, and we're seeing some excellent offers come in. If you're thinking about selling, now's a great time to cash out." I sat still, my heart pounding in my chest. I hadn't told anyone I was thinking about selling. This agent, he didn't know anything about my plans, or did he? I carefully kept my voice steady. "I haven't made any decisions about selling just yet," I said. "I'm just taking my time." "Of course, Mr. Hayes," the agent replied, clearly not taking the hint. "But I would recommend thinking about it. If you want to get top dollar for the property, now's the time. The market's hot and your home has a lot of potential." I let him go on for a few more minutes before I cut him off. "I appreciate the call, but I'm not ready to sell at the moment," I said firmly. "I'll keep you in mind if that changes." "Understood," he said, and the line went dead. I sat there staring at the phone in my hand. This call had set off a series of alarms in my mind. Caitlin and Jeremy hadn't mentioned selling the house to me, but they didn't have to. They had already been talking to people who could help them get what they wanted without ever involving me. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about securing their future at any cost, even if it meant cutting me out completely. I wasn't going to let that happen, not again. The next step was clear. I had to make sure the agent wouldn't approach Caitlin or Jeremy about selling the house. I had to stay one step ahead of them. So I called Todd Fisher again, my mind racing as I explained the situation to him. "I think they're trying to make a move," I said, my voice low. "They're not going to come right out and ask me to sell, but they're trying to line up the pieces behind my back. I need to make sure they can't touch anything. I need to put it in writing." Todd didn't hesitate. "I'll make sure everything's locked down for you. I'll draft a temporary injunction that prevents the property from being sold without your approval. We can have it in place by the end of the week." I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. It felt like a weight had been lifted. With the injunction in place, there would be no way for Caitlin and Jeremy to move forward with their plans without my explicit permission. This was the final step in my revenge. They wouldn't see it coming. The day the injunction was finalized, I took a moment to breathe. For the first time in weeks, everything felt in control. I had made sure my property was untouchable. I had made sure Caitlin and Jeremy couldn't make any moves without me being involved. But I knew they wouldn't give up that easily. They would keep pushing, keep scheming, until they thought they had a way around it. And sure enough, a few days later, Caitlin called again. "Dad," she said, her voice much softer than usual. "We need to talk. Jeremy and I have been thinking. We really want what's best for you, and we're starting to think that maybe it's time for us to sit down and discuss everything. What happens with the house, with the future. We've been planning a trip to look at some places near Boulder, and it would be great if we could all be on the same page before we make any moves." The bait was obvious. She was trying to get me to cave in, trying to make me feel guilty again. She thought I was weak. She thought I was scared. But I wasn't about to play into her hand this time. I was silent for a long moment, letting the tension build between us. "I think we've already discussed everything, Caitlin," I said, my voice steady. "And as I've said before, I'm not ready to make any decisions. I think we'll leave it at that." There was a silence on the other end. For a moment I thought she might argue, but instead she sighed. "All right, Dad, I just want what's best for you. We'll talk again soon." I ended the call without saying another word, the tension that had been hanging between us dissipating like a cloud. She thought she could wear me down. She thought she could manipulate me into giving in, but I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Now everything was in motion. They would have no choice but to respect my decisions, and if they tried to push me again, well, that was when the real fireworks would begin. But if you think they were going to back off quietly, think again. The storm was coming, and when it hit, it would be far bigger than they could ever imagine. But if you're wondering what happens when Caitlin and Jeremy finally realize they've lost, you'll want to stay tuned. The real twist is just around the corner. I thought I was prepared for what came next, but as I sat there in my quiet house, watching the shadows stretch across the floor, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break. I had everything in place, my estate locked down, the injunction protecting the house, but Caitlin and Jeremy were still out there, circling like vultures. I knew they wouldn't give up easily. They never did. Days passed. The quiet was almost suffocating. Every time my phone rang, I braced myself for another call from Caitlin. I had stopped answering her calls for the most part. What could she say that would change anything? The truth was, there was nothing left to say. They had made their move, and now it was my turn. Then one afternoon, as I sat sipping my coffee at the kitchen table, the phone buzzed again. My heart dropped when I saw the name on the screen. It was Caitlin. I considered letting it go to voicemail. I had done it before, after all, but something inside of me clicked. Maybe it was time to hear what she had to say this time, so I picked up. "Dad," Caitlin's voice came through, softer than usual. "Can we talk? I've been thinking about everything. Jeremy and I have come to a decision. We think we need to come over and have a serious conversation about the house and your future. It's time we all talk about it face to face." I could feel my pulse quicken. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. This wasn't just another one of her usual calls. No, this was her finally realizing that I wasn't going to just hand everything over. "I'm not sure what there is to talk about, Caitlin," I said, keeping my voice calm, though my blood was starting to boil. "I've already made it clear that I'm not selling the house. I've made my decisions." "I understand, Dad," she said quickly, but there was something in her voice that felt off. "But this is different. I think we need to lay everything out on the table, for your sake and for mine. I don't want this to drive a wedge between us." A wedge? I had to fight back a laugh. She was the one who had been pushing me away, pushing me to the brink of being discarded like an old coat. But now she wanted to talk. She wanted to lay it all out. I wasn't buying it. "I've heard this before," I replied coolly. "I don't need to lay anything out. I'm fine. The house is fine. I'm not going anywhere, Caitlin. You and Jeremy need to figure out what you're really after, because I'm done being your pawn." There was a silence on the other end, long enough that I could feel the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. Then Caitlin spoke again, her voice quieter, almost nervous. "Dad, I don't think you understand. We've already made arrangements. Jeremy's been talking to someone about the house, and well, it's happening whether you like it or not." My stomach dropped. "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, my voice suddenly rising. "You've been talking to someone. You've made arrangements without telling me." There was a pause, but then she said it, the words I had been dreading. "We've already signed the paperwork. The house is going on the market, Dad. I'm sorry, but we're just doing what's best for you. You've been resistant, but this is what you need. It's time to move on." I could feel my breath catch in my throat, like the walls of the room were closing in on me. I was paralyzed for a moment, the shock of what she had just said hitting me like a slap. They had gone behind my back. They had taken matters into their own hands, thinking that I wouldn't notice, thinking that I wouldn't fight back. I wasn't prepared for this. You think you can just sell my house without my permission? My voice was low, but it shook with fury. You think you can just take it all away from me? It's already done, Dad, she said, her tone final, like she had already won. The papers are signed. The real estate agent is set to list it next week. This is for the best, I promise. Don't you dare do this, I hissed, my grip tightening around the phone. I don't care what you've signed. I'll fight you on this. I'll make sure you never see a dime from this house. You think you're in control, you're wrong. Her voice wavered, but she quickly recovered. I'm doing this for you, you'll see, just trust me. Trust you? I scoffed. You're trying to rob me of everything I've built. You and Jeremy don't care about me. You care about what you can get. You don't get to decide this. This isn't your decision to make. She was silent for a long moment, and for a second I thought she might finally back off. But then she said it, the words that broke through all the anger, all the frustration, and all the betrayal. I'm doing this for my family, Dad, not just for me, for us. We need this. There it was, the truth, laid bare for me to see. They weren't doing this for me. They weren't doing it for my sake. They were doing it for themselves, for their own comfort, their own future. They had been planning this for months, and now they thought they could just go ahead and execute their plan without me knowing. The reality of the situation hit me hard. The blind rage I had been feeling over the last few weeks suddenly intensified. They thought they had won. They thought they could just walk in and take what wasn't theirs. But they hadn't seen the full picture yet. They didn't know what I had planned. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I had to think. I had to outmaneuver them. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I'll see you soon, Caitlin, I said, my voice cold and measured. But I'm not done yet, and neither are you. The call ended with a click, and I sat there for a moment, letting the full weight of her words settle over me. I was angry, yes, but I wasn't going to let this stand. Not this time. Not when I had everything in place. The storm was here, and this time I was the one who would decide when it was over. But you're probably wondering what I'll do next, how I'll turn this all around. Don't worry. The next few moves will surprise them. Stick around, because when the final act unfolds, Caitlin and Jeremy won't know what hit them, and I'll make sure they'll never forget what happens when you underestimate a man who's had enough. The days that followed were a blur of preparation, a quiet fury simmering beneath the surface. Caitlin and Jeremy had crossed the line. They thought they could take everything from me, including my home, but what they didn't realize was that I wasn't going to let it happen, not without a fight. The injunction had been set, the estate locked down, but now the real work began. I knew I had to make my next move carefully. I needed to turn the tables on them to show them exactly who they were dealing with. I couldn't just play defense anymore. I had to go on the offensive. And the longer I let them believe they had the upper hand, the more dangerous it became. I had a plan, one that would hit them where it hurt the most. I spent the next few days making calls, some to lawyers, some to people in my network, people I'd worked with over the years. I was setting the stage, getting everything lined up. I needed to make sure I had all the right pieces in place before Caitlin and Jeremy made their next move. They thought they had already won. They thought the house was as good as sold, but they hadn't counted on me yet. Todd Fisher had been helpful, but I needed more. I needed leverage. And that's when I called in a favor from an old friend, someone who knew the ins and outs of property and inheritance law better than anyone. His name was Mark Reynolds. We worked together years ago when I was first building the business, and he had always been someone I could count on. We hadn't spoken in a while, but when I reached out, he picked up on the first ring. "What's going on, Dennis?" Mark's voice was gruff but friendly. "I need your help," I said, getting straight to the point. "I've got a situation. Caitlin and Jeremy are trying to sell my house behind my back. They think they've already signed everything, but they're wrong. I need to make sure they can't do that. Can you help?" I know the people you're talking about, Mark replied, a knowing edge to his voice. I've had my eye on them for a while. You're right to be worried. I can help, but we're going to need to move fast. I'm ready, I said. What do we need to do? Mark outlined a strategy for me, one that involved putting the house into a trust. It was a legal maneuver that would lock the property in place and prevent Caitlin and Jeremy from doing anything with it without going through a lengthy court process. It wasn't foolproof, but it was the best shot I had. With the trust in place, they wouldn't be able to sell the house without going to court first, and by then I would have all the evidence I needed to stop them cold. I wasn't about to let them get away with this, not when I still had the power to stop them. The next day I met with Mark in person. He walked me through the paperwork, explaining every detail to make sure I understood exactly what I was signing. As I looked over the documents, something inside of me clicked. This wasn't just about the house. This was about taking back my life, taking back control. And Caitlin and Jeremy would learn the hard way that they couldn't just walk all over me. We finalized the trust and Mark made sure everything was filed correctly. It was done. The house was no longer theirs to sell. The paperwork would be filed and they would have no idea what hit them. I didn't tell Caitlin or Jeremy about the trust. I didn't need to. The plan was in motion. Now it was time to wait for them to make the next move. The call came a week later. It was Caitlin, of course. She sounded different this time. There was no pretense of warmth in her voice, no forced concern. This time she was all business. "Dad," she said, her tone clipped, "I need you to sign some papers. The sale of the house is almost complete, and we need your signature to finalize everything." I felt a smile tug at the corners of my mouth. She had no idea that everything she thought she was about to do was already legally blocked. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said, keeping my voice calm, my hands steady. "You see, Caitlin, I'm not going to sign anything." "Dad, please," she said, her voice rising. "This is ridiculous. We've already signed everything. It's time to move forward." "No," I replied, my voice unwavering. "You've signed everything, yes, but you forgot one very important detail. You don't own the house, not anymore." There was a long silence on the other end. I could practically hear her brain working as she processed what I just said. Finally, she spoke, her voice full of confusion. "What do you mean I don't own the house? I signed the papers. The real estate agent is already working on the listing. This is done, Dad." "It's not done," I said, a chill creeping into my voice. "You see, while you've been busy trying to make deals behind my back, I've been making sure you can't touch a damn thing. You're not getting a penny from this house. The paperwork is already in place. It's locked down." She was silent for a long moment, and I could feel the weight of the words sinking in. She wasn't in control anymore. I had taken back what was rightfully mine. The tables had turned. "Dad," she said, her voice faltering, "please, we can work this out. You don't understand." "No, Caitlin," I interrupted, my tone hardening. "I understand perfectly. You've been using me for years, taking everything I gave you, and now you're trying to take the one thing that's left. But you're not going to get away with it. Not this time." The phone went quiet again, and I knew she was seething on the other end. But I didn't care. I had made my move, and there was no going back. "Consider this the last time you try to manipulate me," I said before hanging up. I set the phone down on the table and let out a long breath. The anger, the frustration, the years of feeling like I had no control, it all started to fade, replaced by something new: satisfaction, victory. I had finally taken back my power, and Caitlin and Jeremy would never see it coming. But the storm wasn't over. Not yet. The aftermath would come soon enough, and when it did, I would be ready. You're probably wondering what happened next, how Caitlin and Jeremy reacted when they realized the truth. Stay tuned. The final act of this story is just about to unfold. The days that followed felt surreal. The sense of victory that had surged through me after that phone call began to settle into something more complicated. The power had shifted, but the storm hadn't passed. Caitlin and Jeremy would eventually realize that their plan had been upended, but I wasn't sure what form their reaction would take. Anger, desperation. I had no idea, but I wasn't about to back down now. I had made my move, and now I was going to see it through to the end. I kept myself busy around the house, trying to keep my mind off what was to come. Every creak of the floorboards, every sound of the wind outside, it all felt amplified, like the quiet was pregnant with anticipation. I knew they would make their move soon enough. People like Caitlin and Jeremy didn't take defeat lying down. Sure enough, just a few days after that phone call, Caitlin showed up at my door. She didn't bother to call first, didn't warn me that she was coming. She just showed up, determined to fix what she had perceived as a mistake. I heard the knock, low but insistent, and I froze for a moment, the weight of what was coming sinking in. I wasn't sure how to feel. Part of me wanted to stand my ground, keep up the calm exterior I'd been wearing since the plan went into motion. But another part of me felt something else, something darker. I opened the door, and there she was, standing in front of me with a mix of determination and guilt on her face. Her eyes were wide, searching mine for a crack, a hint that I might be willing to forgive her. "Dad," she started, her voice strained, "we need to talk." I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside to let her in. She walked past me into the living room, and I closed the door behind her, my mind already turning over what she might say. I had no intention of letting her back in easily. The trust was broken. The game had changed. "I know this is hard for you," Caitlin began, sitting down on the couch, "but you have to understand. I'm doing this because it's what's best for you. I never wanted it to go this far, but you're not getting any younger. You're not well, and I'm trying to help." I didn't interrupt her. I couldn't. I needed her to say everything she was thinking. Let her try to manipulate me, to play the victim. It would only make my victory sweeter in the end. "I'm trying to fix things, Dad," she continued, her voice trembling now. "But you're being so stubborn. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Please just listen to me." I stayed silent, my gaze never leaving hers. The silence between us felt thick, but I could see the cracks forming in her confidence. She had no idea what had just happened, no idea that everything she had counted on had been destroyed. Finally, after a long pause, I spoke. "You think you can just come in here and convince me to sign away my future?" I asked, my voice low but steady. "You think I don't see what you've been doing? This has never been about me, Caitlin. This is about you, about what you and Jeremy think you can take from me." Her face faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Dad, you don't understand. I'm doing this for the family. I'm doing this for us. This house is just a burden. You don't need it anymore. You don't need to be alone. You don't need to worry about anything." "I've been worrying about you and Jeremy for years," I shot back, my words biting. "You're not doing this for me. You're doing this for yourselves, for the money, for the comfort. And I'm not going to let you take what's mine." She looked at me then, her eyes wide, and for a moment I saw something in her I hadn't seen before: fear. It wasn't the fear of being caught, but the fear of realizing that she had pushed too far, that I wasn't going to give in this time. "You've signed everything," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "The house is already in a trust. You can't sell it without going through a long, expensive legal process. You think you've already won. You're wrong." Caitlin's face drained of color as the words sank in. She opened her mouth to say something, but no sound came out. She stood up abruptly, pacing in the small space of the living room. I could see her trying to come to terms with what I had just said. She hadn't expected this. "Why didn't you tell me?" she finally asked, her voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me what you were doing?" I leaned back in my chair, watching her, letting the silence hang between us for a moment before I answered. "Because I knew what you were planning. I knew the moment I stopped playing your game, you would try to take everything. But I'm done. You don't get to control me anymore, Caitlin." She was silent for a long time, her face a mix of disbelief and anger. I could tell she was struggling with the realization that her plan had fallen apart, that she had been outsmarted. Finally, she spoke again, her voice now tinged with something else, something darker, more desperate. "I don't care about the house, Dad," she said, her words coming out in a rush. "I care about you, but you don't see that. You don't see that I'm trying to help. I'm trying to make sure you're okay, but you're just pushing me away." I stood up slowly, walking toward her, my eyes never leaving hers. "Don't pretend this is about me, Caitlin. This is about you, about your need to control everything. And I'm done. This house is staying with me. It's staying with the family that built it, and you're not going to take it." She stared at me for a moment longer, her breath coming in short gasps. And then, without another word, she turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a moment, the tension in the air thick. I didn't feel the anger anymore. The victory was mine now. But I knew the war wasn't over yet. Caitlin and Jeremy weren't going to back down so easily. I had won this round, but there was still one final chapter to this story. If you think Caitlin and Jeremy are going to walk away from this quietly, think again. There's more to come. And when everything comes crashing down, they'll finally see what happens when you push too far. Stay tuned. The real ending is yet to come. It's funny how quickly everything can change. One moment, you're sitting in your home, thinking you have everything under control, and the next, it's all falling apart. But as I sit here now, watching the sun sink behind the horizon from my front porch, I can't help but feel that strange sense of peace. The storm is over. Not because Caitlin and Jeremy finally gave up, but because I finally stopped being afraid of them. I stopped being afraid of losing everything. I stopped being afraid of being alone. And in the end, that's what made all the difference. The morning after Caitlin left, I received a call from my lawyer, Todd Fisher. His voice was calm, but I could hear the undercurrent of urgency. "Dennis," Todd said, "I just wanted to update you on the status of the situation. Caitlin and Jeremy went ahead and filed some paperwork with the courts. They're trying to contest the trust, claiming you were not of sound mind when you created it. They're pulling out all the stops. You're going to need to prepare for a legal battle." I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the news. I knew they would fight back, but part of me had hoped they might give up after everything had been laid bare. I was wrong. "Let them fight," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not backing down. We've got everything in place. They can contest all they want, but it won't change anything. I'm not losing this." "I hear you, Dennis," Todd replied. "But it's going to take some time. The process won't be easy. They're not going to go down without a fight." "I've spent my life fighting for what's mine," I said quietly, staring out at the empty street. "This is no different." For the next few weeks, things settled into a strange kind of rhythm. Caitlin and Jeremy continued to push. Their lawyer sent documents, filed complaints, tried to intimidate me with threats of a prolonged legal battle. But every time they tried to push me to the edge, I stood my ground. I had seen their true colors now. I knew what they were capable of, and I wasn't going to let them take what was mine. But it wasn't just the legal battles that kept me up at night. It was the way Caitlin kept trying to reach me. She sent texts, emails, left voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. The messages were full of guilt, full of apologies, but beneath all of that, I knew what she was really after. She was trying to weaken me, to make me feel sorry for her, to make me think that maybe I had overreacted. But I didn't give in. I couldn't. I had to remind myself every day that this wasn't about me being some old man being stubborn for no reason. This was about respect. This was about showing Caitlin and Jeremy that I wouldn't allow them to use me, to manipulate me, to take everything I had worked for. If that meant losing them, so be it. And then one morning I got a call from Caitlin. Her voice was different this time, broken, raw, like she was finally realizing the consequences of her actions. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling, I need to talk to you. I don't know what to do anymore. Jeremy and we've messed everything up. Please just listen to me." I could hear the strain in her voice, and for the first time in a long time I felt a flicker of something. Guilt, regret. I couldn't say for sure, but it was there. I'm listening, I said, my voice quieter now. I wasn't going to be cold. I wasn't going to act like I didn't care, but I needed her to understand something. I know we made a mistake, she continued. I know we hurt you, but Dad, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I wanted to make sure you weren't alone. I never meant for it to go this far. I stayed silent, letting her words sink in. I could feel the weight of the past few weeks pressing on me. The anger, the frustration, it was all starting to fade. You hurt me, Caitlin, I said finally. But that's not what I'm most upset about. What hurts is that you thought you could just walk in and take everything. You didn't even stop to think about how I would feel. You never gave me the respect I deserved. She was quiet for a long time, and when she spoke again, it was softer, quieter, almost pleading. I never meant to disrespect you, Dad. I don't know what happened. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I see what I've done. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to reach out to comfort her, but another part of me knew better. You can't just take things back, Caitlin, I said gently. You can't just apologize and expect everything to be okay. What's done is done. But that doesn't mean I'm going to let you have everything. This house is mine, and it's staying that way. There was a long pause. I could hear her trying to find the words, but I knew she didn't have any more left. She had pushed me too far. I know, she said softly. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, that I regret what I did. I stayed quiet for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. This wasn't the resolution I had hoped for, but it was the resolution I had earned. The battle wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about respect, about understanding where the lines had been drawn. You don't need to apologize anymore, Caitlin, I said, my voice steady but soft. You've made your choice, and so have I. We both sat in the silence for a few seconds, and then she hung up. The phone call didn't end the story. There was no grand reconciliation. There was no moment where everything fell into place. Caitlin and Jeremy weren't going to come crawling back, and I wasn't going to open the door for them. But in the end, that was the point. I didn't need them. I didn't need their approval, their guilt, or their manipulation. I had fought for what I believed in. I had taken back my life, and the house, my legacy, was mine again. The court battle, the years of tension, it all faded into the background. What mattered now was that I had control. Caitlin and Jeremy would have to find their own way, and I would find mine. As the days passed, I watched the seasons change one by one, and I knew I was finally at peace. It didn't matter that Caitlin and Jeremy had tried to take everything from me. What mattered was that I had kept my dignity. I had kept my home. And now it was mine to protect.